239 people, one Boeing 777, and the most expensive search in aviation history that found almost nothing. On March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 simply vanished from the face of the Earth, sparking the greatest mystery in modern aviation. What happened in those final hours has baffled investigators, devastated families, and spawned countless theories. This is the story of how a routine flight became an unsolvable puzzle that continues to haunt us a decade later. It was supposed to be a normal red-eye flight. March 8, 2014, 12:41 a.m. local time. Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 pushed back from Gate C1 at Kuala Lumpur International Airport. The destination, Beijing Capital International Airport. Flight time, approximately 5 hours and 30 minutes. On board were 239 souls, 227 passengers and 12 crew members. Families heading home, business travelers, tourists. Among them were 2 passengers traveling on stolen Austrian and Italian passports, but this wouldn't become significant until later. The aircraft was a Boeing 777-200ER, one of the most reliable planes ever built. This particular aircraft, registered as 9MMRO, was nearly 12 years old, but had an excellent maintenance record. At the controls was Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, a 53-year-old veteran pilot with over 18,000 flight hours. His co-pilot was 27-year-old Fariq Abdul Hamid, who was actually on his final training flight before being certified to fly the 777 without supervision. Everything seemed perfectly routine. At 1:07 a.m., the aircraft reached its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. The flight was proceeding normally along its planned route over the South China Sea. At 1:19 a.m., the last normal radio communication occurred. Co-pilot Fariq radioed Malaysian air traffic control. "Good night, Malaysian 370. Those would be the last words anyone would hear from flight MH370. Just 2 minutes later, at 1:21 a.m., something extraordinary happened. The aircraft's transponder stopped transmitting. In an instant, MH370 became invisible to civilian air traffic control radar. But here's what makes this truly mysterious. The transponder didn't malfunction. Someone deliberately turned it off. At 1:30 a.m., the plane should have checked in with Vietnamese air traffic control as it entered their airspace. That call never came. By 2:15 a.m., when the plane failed to appear on radar screens in Ho Chi Minh City, controllers knew something was terribly wrong. But what they didn't know was that MH370 hadn't crashed. It was still flying. Unknown to the world at the time, Malaysian military radar had tracked an unidentified aircraft, making a sharp left turn, flying back across Malaysia toward the Indian Ocean. That aircraft was MH370. The plane had deviated from its flight path and was flying in the opposite direction from Beijing. Someone had taken control of the aircraft and deliberately changed course. At 2:25 a.m., all communication systems went dark. No radio calls, no distress signals, no emergency transponder activations. MH370 had become a ghost plane. The last confirmed radar contact was at 2:22 a.m. as the aircraft disappeared over the Andaman Sea, heading toward the Indian Ocean. For the next 6 hours, MH370 continued flying on autopilot, following a programmed route into one of the most remote areas on Earth. At 8:19 a.m., the plane's satellite communication system made one final, automated handshake with an Inmarsat satellite. Then, nothing. Somewhere over the southern Indian Ocean, Malaysia Airlines, flight MH370 simply vanished. When MH370 failed to arrive in Beijing at 6:30 a.m., Malaysia Airlines initially said they had lost contact with the aircraft, but it would take hours before they admitted the plane was actually missing. The first search efforts focused on the South China Sea, along the plane's original flight path. Ships and aircraft from multiple countries scoured the waters, looking for wreckage that wasn't there. Because at that point, no one knew the plane had turned around. It wasn't until March 15th, a full week after the disappearance, that Malaysian authorities finally revealed the crucial information. Military radar had tracked MH370 flying back across Malaysia. The search area shifted to the Indian Ocean, covering an area roughly the size of Australia. It became the most expensive search in aviation history, costing over $200 million. For months, ships dragged sophisticated sonar equipment across the ocean floor. Underwater vehicles scanned the deepest trenches. Satellites analyzed millions of images. They found nothing. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. In Marsat, the British satellite company analyzed the automatic handshake signals from MH370's communication system. Using complex mathematical calculations based on signal timing and frequency shifts, they determined that the plane had flown south into the Indian Ocean until it ran out of fuel. This analysis narrowed the search to a specific corridor in the southern Indian Ocean, roughly 1,000 miles west of Australia. Still, after 3 years of searching, the main wreckage was never found. The only confirmed pieces of MH370 ever recovered were fragments that washed ashore on beaches thousands of miles away. A wing section found on Reunion Island. Pieces of interior paneling were discovered in Mozambique and Madagascar. These fragments confirmed that MH370 had indeed crashed into the Indian Ocean. But they raised more questions than they answered. Where was the rest of the plane? Why were there so few pieces? And most importantly, what had happened to cause this tragedy? Without the main wreckage and the flight data recorders, investigators were left to piece together the mystery from digital breadcrumbs and mathematical calculations. So what really happened to MH370? Over the years, numerous theories have emerged, ranging from mechanical failure to deliberate sabotage. Theory 1. Pilot suicide. The most controversial theory suggests that Captain Zahari deliberately crashed the plane. Investigators found that he had practiced similar flight paths on his home flight simulator, including a route ending in the southern Indian Ocean. His personal life was troubled. He was going through a divorce and facing political issues in Malaysia. The deliberate turning off of communication systems and the precise navigation required to avoid radar detection suggest someone with extensive aviation knowledge. Theory 2. Hijacking. The 2 passengers with stolen passports initially raised terrorism concerns, though they were later identified as Iranian asylum seekers with no terrorist connections. However, some experts believe the plane could have been hijacked by passengers or even crew members, with the hijackers ultimately losing control of the aircraft. Theory 3. Cyber attack. As aircraft become increasingly computerized, some theorists suggest MH370 could have been the victim of a sophisticated cyber attack that allowed hackers to take control of the plane's systems remotely. This could explain the systematic shutdown of communication equipment and the precise course changes. Theory 4. Mechanical failure. A catastrophic failure could have incapacitated the crew while leaving the autopilot engaged. A fire or decompression event might have forced the crew to turn back toward Malaysia before ultimately succumbing, leaving the plane to fly on autopilot until fuel exhaustion. Theory 5. Government cover-up. Some believe that MH370 was shot down, either accidentally or deliberately, by military forces and that multiple governments have conspired to hide the truth. The delayed revelation of military radar data And the conflicting information released by Malaysian authorities fuel these suspicions. Theory 6. Diego Garcia. Conspiracy theorists point to the U.S. military base on Diego Garcia Island, suggesting the plane was either hijacked and landed there, or was shot down to prevent it from being used as a weapon against the base. The most widely accepted theory among investigators is pilot suicide. The evidence seems to point toward a deliberate act by someone with intimate knowledge of the aircraft and aviation procedures. The timing of the communication shutdowns, the sophisticated route taken to avoid radar detection, and the flight simulator evidence all suggest premeditation. But without the black boxes, we may never know the complete truth. In July 2014, just 4 months after MH370 vanished, another Malaysia Airlines 777, flight MH17, was shot down over Ukraine, killing all 298 people on board. The double tragedy devastated Malaysia Airlines, which had now lost 2 aircraft and 537 people in the span of 4 months. For the families of MH370's passengers and crew, the lack of closure has been unbearable. Without wreckage, without bodies, without answers, they remain in a state of limbo. Some refuse to believe their loved ones are dead. Others have spent their life savings searching for answers. Support groups have formed, bringing together families from around the world, united by their shared loss and frustration. The Malaysian government officially declared the disappearance an accident, and all 239 people aboard presumed dead in January 2015. But many families rejected this conclusion, demanding concrete evidence. In 2016, the official search was called off after covering 120,000 square kilometers of the ocean floor without finding the main wreckage. Private search efforts continued, funded by families and independent investigators, but these too have yielded no significant discoveries. The case of MH370 has fundamentally changed aviation. New tracking requirements now mandate that commercial aircraft report their position every 15 minutes when flying over remote areas. Real-time flight tracking systems have been enhanced, and there are ongoing discussions about making flight data recorders deployable in emergency situations so they can be recovered even if the main aircraft is never found. But perhaps the most important change is psychological. MH370 shattered our assumption that in the modern world, with all our technology and surveillance systems, large aircraft simply don't disappear. It reminded us that Earth still has vast, unexplored spaces where mysteries can persist. 10 years later, MH370 remains aviation's greatest unsolved mystery. Somewhere in the depths of the Indian Ocean lies a Boeing 777, containing the answers to what happened on that March night in 2014. The black boxes, if they survived the impact and the years underwater, hold the final conversations, the system warnings, the truth about those last terrifying hours. 239 people boarded a plane in Kuala Lumpur, expecting to land in Beijing 6 hours later. Instead, they vanished into one of the most enduring mysteries of our time. Was it a mechanical failure that spiraled out of control? A deliberate act by someone on board? A cyber attack? Government conspiracy? Without the wreckage, without the flight recorders, without witnesses, MH370 keeps its secrets. The families still wait for answers. The investigators are still analyzing data. The ocean still guards its mysteries. And somewhere in the vast expanse of the Indian Ocean, flight MH370 rests in the darkness, holding the truth about one of the most baffling disappearances in history. What do you think happened to Malaysia Airlines flight MH370? Was it pilot suicide, mechanical failure, or something else entirely? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to explore more aviation mysteries and unsolved cases, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because the skies hold secrets we're still trying to uncover. Until we find MH370, the mystery lives on.